Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. It's a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casazza, joined by Chris Anderson to talk about the beginning of, I guess the beginning of the beginning, Chris. This is the key stretch of the season for West Virginia. And I say that, which is weird because it was supposed to be 4 games, 4 weeks. Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona. Turns out Oklahoma State's a pumpkin, and we probably can't count that one, although it's a win in place of a loss. But now the hard games begin. Iowa State ranked, Kansas State ranked. Arizona seems like it's gotten its act together under a first-year coach and has established a bit of my identity. Who knows where that'll be? That's a couple weeks from now. We're not going to get into that. We'll talk about Iowa State here, Chris. And for many teams, it's kind of a thorn in the side in the past for West Virginia. You think of some of the good Dana Holgorsen teams. You think of some of the times that Neil Brown has looked, his offense especially has looked maybe the most lost or most punchless. Those have coincided with Iowa State and some things they do, particularly on defense. There have been a couple of times I think people overlooked this. Yeah, Iowa State offense has been really good with some pros, it turns out, too. Catching the ball, running the ball, blocking, playing defense. 5-0, Chris, for the first time in 45 years. So you figure, wow, this must be a continuation of the trend. And yet, I think as we go through this conversation, maybe not as much as West Virginia, but Iowa State still has probably a lot to prove to validate where it stands right now.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions in the mailbag earlier this week was, hey, it started with some comment about West Virginia beating the two worst teams in the Big 12 conference. And I thought, Oklahoma State and Kansas have been playing poorly for sure, certainly below the expectations for those two teams. But um, Iowa State has beaten Baylor and Houston. Oh, uh, Iowa State may have beaten the two worst teams in the Big 12 conference. They both might have beaten the four worst teams in the Big 12 conference. We'll put it that way. So maybe they both need to prove something. Again, it is kind of stunning when you think about it and look at it a little deeper. And we will talk about it. You and I kind of had a little huddle before and have some similar thoughts about some of this because Iowa State's 5-0 and they're ranked number 11 in the country. It's hard to go 5-0 against anybody, but this schedule is not what I don't even know if people are arguing that it's good or difficult, but it ain't. Let's put it that way.
You cannot possibly argue this is a good schedule.
Okay, good. I was like, I was starting to, I don't know if I was building it. I preemptively burnt the straw man that I was building there because I was building it up that people were making that argument. And I don't think anybody actually is. So no one's making that argument as they should not because it's a terrible schedule.
Good. I hope the person that sent me this DM doesn't hear this, but I don't my DMs are they're open, I guess. I'm not sure how this works out for Twitter, but sometimes you have to check to see if you get one from somebody. I don't know what that's like. Like I'm not anybody can DM me, but I can't see anybody's DM. But an Iowa State fan listened to our mailbag podcast the other day, and I said, and I forgot I even said it, but it was like a sentence. It wasn't a paragraph or like some monologue by me, but that the Iowa State defense is not what you're accustomed to, and it's maybe not as good as what you're used to seeing. And this person sent me a bunch of stats, number X and this, X and this, X and this, and like top 10 for sure. And I don't really still believe it. Like I just don't. We can get into that here a little bit. But the other part of this coin is West Virginia, where you can look at their numbers that are not good and say, I actually think they might be better than this. Might also be a pumpkin too, Chris. We'll find out before too long. I think in 2 Saturdays we'll have a lot of answers and probably fewer questions. And then even when we have the questions, less incentive to go back and revisit it and double or triple check at that point. Hit me on this though. Does West Virginia have the argument that in its newly constituted state on defense and whatever they got going again or got going on offense, better than what the numbers say? Don't know, but I think that's an argument you could make. They don't want to be worse than the numbers say. They don't want to say they are what the numbers say, but there's certainly some mojo to that idea.
I thought you were going to kind of kick us in just like you did with your abbreviated podcast, where I think you said the words, does the Big 12 championship game go through Morgantown? Amazing. Like,
Technically, right? I mean, technically, 3 contenders will be there in the next 2 Saturdays, so you kind of have to go through Morgantown. There's a couple other cities in the Big 12, but you can't take Morgantown out of the picture right now.
hey, Mike, I'm not hating it, man. I loved it. Now, I loved it so much. I even made it the title of the YouTube video for your abbreviated podcast. It's like, mwah, beautiful. Loved it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I believe that. So, because again, it's a little bit more of a what have you done for me lately with West Virginia? Almost as if you talked about it when you kind of looked at last season in retrospect and you said, man, what is this team? You don't really know. And then people would say, hey, the team at the beginning of the season was a lot different than the team at the end. And the team at the end did this, and this. And the stats during those games were this, and this. It kind of feels that way with it so far because the West Virginia team that's playing right now is not the same team that played against Penn State. Now, Penn State is by far the best team that West Virginia has played on their schedule. So that certainly makes a difference. But how like how do you really judge West Virginia's team when you have kind of like that outlier of that game of where West Virginia just played horrendously, played a tough opponent. They're not playing an opponent like that again. They won't. None of the teams on the schedule are going to be as good as Penn State. And I think West Virginia is a different team. So I think it's a bit unfair to kind of compare that to this right now. And maybe that's why West Virginia is better than the overall numbers might indicate.
Yeah, I'm also not sure they'll play a team like Pitt again the rest of the season too, believe it or not. Pitt is Kansas, Chris. You heard it here first. Telling you, you look back now and that doesn't seem like it's as egregious of a defeat, apart from the way it happened, which is underline it, egregious. I get that. But good offense. It turned out to be better than maybe you expected going into that game and better than it looked. A lot more consistency with that outfit for the Panthers. We're not here to talk about Pitt, though. We're here to talk about West Virginia night game. The record, Chris, I'm not going to say it again, but Neil Brown home games, excuse me, Neil Brown night games, 13 wins in 22 games. You can do the record. I'm not going to say those numbers out loud. I'm not going to do it. But you do the math, and that's probably a stingy number. But um, man, this is probably a really good situation. I keep saying this, like they were in a bad spot 1-2. You win 2 games, don't care who it's against, but the best you can be is 2-0. They're trying to put all their eggs in the Big 12 basket, and you got 2 home games at night against teams you got to get over if you're going to get to the top. They got to make the best of the situation. Conversely, Iowa State, have they been in a zoo like this before? I played Iowa, so that's probably a little bit um, kind of a different animal, I guess. They're familiar with that rivalry. They play it every year. But a night game here in Morgantown, I don't know. What type of that dynamic do you think that is? And what do you make of back-to-back night games?
I hate the back to back. I think people like variety. I know there's, oh man, I love night games. Oh, I love noon games. A million different reasons why people like those games. We can all agree that the 3:30 games are terrible because it takes up your entire day. But the back to back, from a fan perspective, I think, um, I imagine a lot of fans probably are not thrilled. Like, of course, you want a couple, you want two, three, maybe four, but spread them out throughout the season. I think they would like that more. I'm looking at Iowa State's history with that. Obviously, I think fan turnout for West Virginia is going to be great. I think it's going to be good. People were asking another question in the mailbag was, "Hey, look, thousands of seats available. Why?" A lot of this is week of planning. A lot of people do week of planning for these games, purchases for these games, especially if you're, not a season ticket holder, not trying to get marquee seats. If you're just trying to get a seat in the stadium somewhere, you can wait till later to get on those. And seats are dwindling fast. Like I think I found at the time that I looked to answer this question on the mailbag back on Tuesday morning, like 4 available seats for general admission and lower bowl entirely. So they're going quick. I think it'll be a good turnout. Iowa State, I believe the last time they played at night, let me double check this. One more game at night against an opponent was that on the road, Texas last
Mhm.
season, and they lost 26-16. And it was kind of, I mean, it was competitive. It wasn't some kind of blowout, but
Now that's a
Iowa
home game.
State certainly, or was that a home game? That
Yeah,
was a
it's a
home
home
game,
game.
Fred. But still, I think that might have been their last night game. I have to double check that. God caught me on guard here to doing
Okay, you lose a home night game. That's not good either.
no research on the fly, trying to find something out here. But
Let me fill for you while you do that. How does
yeah,
that sound?
go ahead.
Because here's why I know that that was incorrect. Iowa
Oh,
State is 5-5 in its last 10 Big 12 road games. Iowa State has won its last 5 Big 12 road games. One this year, 4 last year, and the teams they've beaten. I don't know, Chris. What do you make of this? Houston, not great. Won Kansas State last year, good win. But before that, BYU, nope. Baylor, nope. Cincinnati, nope. And got smoked by Oklahoma, 50-20. That's the road history in the past season. Plus, the year before that, they were 0-4 on the road in Big 12 play. So they've had a real mixed bag and have kind of feasted on some of your bottom rung opponents in the Big 12 on the road, which, hey, you play the schedule. You got to clean up those road games as you can. I would say, apart from playing at ranked Kansas State last year, Um, this is their probably second toughest of those six that we've talked about here. Obviously, Oklahoma a little bit difficult, but in that 5-game winning streak, figured Kansas State last year, Morgantown this year, those are the two toughest ones. And can West Virginia, can they make that matter? Chris, do you have an answer now?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, all you got to be thinking about it. Have you ever seen that meme where the guy he's sweating and he's got the two red buttons and he's got to decide
Yeah.
which one to press? This is the WVU fans who were saying, "Hey, West Virginia, it's fake what happened last season because they beat Cincinnati, Baylor, and BYU."
Guess who else did?
And then you're going to be scared of Iowa State because they beat Cincinnati, Baylor, and BYU. They can't both be true. Okay. Like they can't both be true. Um, so yeah, I think this is going to be a tough one for Iowa State coming into Morgantown. And there's more individual matchups or at least kind of themes here with stats that, man, we catch a lot of flack sometimes for being maybe too, not too negative about WVU, but maybe too positive about their opponents. Is this going to be one of those rare instances where we are too negative about the opponent, Mike?
It could be like last week. The flat guy got was like, wow, that was like head geography for Mike Gundy, and that wasn't the point. Like I didn't think Oklahoma State was good, and I did not understand a 5-point spread in that game, especially at home where they're not invulnerable. I just saw all the traps, like the way that Gundy plays and the way that he knew he had to play, and that the what's the opposite of peak West Virginia? Valley West Virginia is to fall into that trap, to turn over, to be sloppy, to have penalties, to fall behind, to slow start. And like if Gundy gets ahead of you, he's going to stay ahead of you. And he had a plan to get in that game and he tried, it didn't work. But I was just really wary of that for West Virginia. It turns out the good West Virginia came out. This one here, I can see all the same warning signs like Matt Campbell, John Heacock. They have their styles, and when they're good, they do this, and they've been able to do that this year. I just don't know that if it applies to this, like a perfect overlap of what they've done being immediately replicated against West Virginia, which Chris, let's just get into it then. We'll start Iowa State defense, West Virginia offense. Chris, is Iowa State good on defense? Let me just lay it out there. Is Iowa State good on defense?
We don't know. I think the example I gave in
Wild,
the
right?
mailbag, yeah, in the mailbag I gave was, hey, after week two, we were like, what do we know about West Virginia? They played a top 10 team in Penn State and they played an FCS program in Albany. So hard to really tell. We have a little bit clearer of a picture now, but Iowa State, you go through and look at some of the teams that they played. I know you got another stat, but it was similar to what we got here. I did scoring offenses, and their scoring offenses in order: an FCS program, 85th, 110th, 132nd, and 74th. That team 74th was Baylor, who had 21 points on the first drive of the third quarter, and the lead. Baylor lead over Iowa State had 21 points already, and they were driving again in what Dana Holgerson used to call the scoring zone inside the 30,
Yeah.
and they threw a pick in the end zone. So they were on their way to 28 plus points in that game before that pick in the end zone. And then, from then on out, it was 3 and out, and Iowa State kind of took command. But they seem a little more vulnerable on defense than maybe the general stats might indicate.
Yeah, and here's why it's wild to even ask that question, Chris. Scoring defense, number 6 nationally, 10 points per game. Passing defense, number 5th nationally, 133.6 points per game. Rushing defense, if I can find that one here. Where is that one at? It should be alphabetical, right? I don't know where that one's at. Why is rushing defense not together? Oh, 67th, 138 per game. That's about 100 yards less than West Virginia averages on offense. So some of those metrics are really good, but who have they played? Like their strength of schedule can't be very good, especially when you look at their offenses. And I don't know. When I start looking at teams, you can look at all that stuff and your eyes can roll back in your head and you can get really impressed or intimidated or really down or discouraged depending on what you value. It's like, oh my gosh, they give up a ton of passing yards a game. Well, sometimes you're just beating a team really bad and they're going to pass and you're just like, listen, pass all you want. You're going to complete 20 passes to get 100 yards. That's how it goes. But the numbers I looked at that I thought were telling had to do with their scoring defense and their scoring defense and total defense against the teams they played. So Iowa, Arkansas State, Houston, and Baylor. Total offense, right? Or excuse me, yards per play. That's what I did. Yards per play. 78th, 122, 110, and 93. Iowa State does not let you get yardage. It's remarkable. Like their drives are short. you're not going to hit big plays on them because the way they play their defense to those safeties, but also you're not going to stack plays and get yards. So if your yards per play is low, that could be a sign of their defense, but could also be that those teams that have played more teams than just Iowa State aren't very good offensively. And then the what was the other one there? Scoring offense. 33, 98, 112, 112. That's the scoring offenses they played. So not really great offenses in either regard that you look at it. Maybe that's a reflection of the Iowa State defense. There's chicken and egg there, I guess, but like you're looking at 4 games against lousy offenses versus 1 game against a defense that could be good, but just 1 game against them. Granted, 4 of them, I understand that, but just seems to be like they haven't played an offense yet that is as good as West Virginia's. Like you rattle up those offenses, the FCS team, North Dakota, not even the good North Dakota, just North Dakota, Iowa, Arkansas State, Houston, Baylor. Clearly, West Virginia, the best offense Iowa State has seen so far.
Yeah. To your point about chicken or egg, which one is it? Oh, hey, Houston scoring the offense is bad because Iowa State shut them out. No,
Hmm.
Cincinnati shut Houston out the week before, and they
Hmm.
scored 12 points the week before that, and 7 points the week before that. So that's it's not bad because of Iowa State. Similar with Iowa, they held Iowa to 19 points. Well, in the other 2 games against group of 4 opponents or power 4 opponents, Iowa's averaging 19 points per game as well. So they're again, we don't know. Like the statistics say, the general statistics, they hate just basic stuff that you might look at the superficial things, total, scoring defense, or whatever, might say that Iowa State is one of the 10 best defenses in the country. You look deeper, they're not. They're just flat not, or they got to prove it moving forward. Because right now, they're just not.
They're really good in turnover margin. They hit the ball away. They played 4 teams that turn the ball over an awful lot too. Those teams that I mentioned, in particular, Arkansas State, Houston, Baylor, are bottom 30 teams in turnovers too. Iowa didn't put the ball in jeopardy very much, but those 3 teams have done a lion's share of turnovers for them too. This defense is kind of is what it is. Heacock's been there since Matt Campbell's been there. When they were kind of in trouble, I think late in their second season they changed. They ended up winning a couple games. They beat some good spread air raid teams, Oklahoma, West Virginia included in that group to kind of get this going. It's like the three high safeties. It's gonna be a really weird thing they do. They're gonna keep 1 guy in the middle. They're gonna keep 2 on the outside, and you gotta find ways to manipulate them. And then as we know, the box looks empty. You're gonna run into it, and the next thing you know, where there were 4, there are 6 or 7 hats, and you're not used to it because they're coming down and filling a gap. This has been pretty effective for a long, long time, even as defenses have kind of mimicked this, even in the NFL a little bit now too. Why is this so effective for so long now? Because it's cyclical, right? It hasn't spun around and it hasn't really caught up either.
Well, I think the fact that they can take away the deep pass
Yeah.
forces these opposing teams to make numerous plays in a row. You have to execute again and again and again. You can't hit that 60, that, I don't want to say lucky. You can't, oh, this isn't working, throw it deep. Oh, we got a 60-yard bomb, touchdown, count 7 points. You have to every single time execute 1 play, 2 play, 3 play, 4 play, 5 play, 6, 7. Like to your point, it's going to be long drives, 10, 11 plays. You have to be able to execute again and again and again. And guess what? You know who's not very good at executing a lot of things consistently in a row? Bunch of college aged boys
Yeah.
and young men. Not very good at that, even the best of them. So I think that is part of the reason why it's so effective. But maybe if you can run the ball. Do you know a team that's pretty good at running the ball, at least lately, Michael?
I think I saw one last week.
Did you?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of been the common factor of, I would say, the 3 games where Iowa State has been pressed, let's say, or have not played well, I guess. Iowa, North Dakota, surprisingly. Again, that was you mentioned it's not even North Dakota State. It's not even the one that you're thinking of being in the national championship for FCS. It's North Dakota. That was 21-3. And North Dakota was inside the 10-yard line multiple times. I think missed a short field goal, settled for a short field goal. That was a competitive game.
Yeah.
Obviously, Iowa was a game where the Hawkeyes, that was one of my charity bets, and I cashed it out mid because I was like, this game is weird because Iowa was inside the 1. I think they had first and goal from the 1 twice and got 3 points out of it. And they were up double digits on them, on the Cyclones also. And even Houston was 20-0, but Houston kind of outgained them on the ground, had 3 turnovers, I think. And that was the big difference in that game, 3-0 on the turnover margin. But all 3 of those teams could run the ball. Houston, again, not a great offensive team, not even close. 5.5 yards per carry in that game. Iowa, 5.4 yards per carry in that game. Even North Dakota nearly went 2-1 in rushing yards and time of possession. Mike, is there somebody you know that likes time of possession?
I'm talking about 48 minutes of it last week, right?
Yeah, they went, I think it was like 38-22 for North Dakota over Iowa State in time of possession because they were able to run the ball against the Cyclones. That's an FCS program that was able to do that against them. So there are vulnerabilities and ones that kind of line up with the things that West Virginia is capable of doing well.
So let's get into the offense then for West Virginia. Okay, we're not going to go deep and take a bunch of 20-yard shots down the field. I probably want to work the seams. This could be a tight end game. It could be a slot receiver game. It does seem to be a running back game, perhaps two at a time, just so you can make sure you have the advantage in the box. But man, if this isn't a 12 personnel game or a 20 personnel game or maybe 21, I guess I've never seen one before then.
Over or under a dozen snaps for Jackson Marco on Saturday.
Oh, just run blocking, a dozen, right?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Just checking. He had 21 in Oklahoma State, but West Virginia did own time of possession in that. So I lowered it a bit, but I do think this is going to be one of those games, just like Oklahoma State. Hey, 15 passes, probably max, lots of runs, lots and lots of runs, lots of two tight end sets, lots of Jackson Marco, lots of Traylon Davis.
How about some personnel? I thought this might be the best secondary in the Big 12. They're number 8 in the country with 8 interceptions. They've turned it over 11 times, which I believe is the highest total in the country. Um, just pretty good at what they do. But like, are there star players? Because we think about what they've been in the past, and you could recognize a lockdown corner, a typical middle linebacker. They've had some good edge players. I don't know they have that anybody that nationally rises to that level right now. They do have some pretty stout players at all three levels, though.
Yeah, two of them stick out. One on the edge and one in the secondary for me personally. Um, Leading the way in total pressures. Pulling up my notes here. Joey Peterson, edge rusher, already has 12, and he's not even playing. Like I don't even know if he's typically like actually listed as a starter. Obviously, he's on the defensive line, so he's rotating a lot, just like every other defensive lineman at every other school. But through 5 games, he's averaging about 33 snaps per game, so not a ton. But he already has 12 pressures on the quarterback, most on the team, and most on the team by a pretty good margin. Yeah, almost double than everybody else. Um, so he's going to be a problem. It is a problem, going to be a problem for West Virginia that they are going to be able to rotate in a lot of guys like that on the defensive line. But the guy I'm really watching closely, and a reason why a lot of teams are struggling to pass the ball against Iowa State, is cornerback John Tez Williams. Teams have targeted him 30 times. 30 times. Like it's like they're not learning their lesson either, because it's double everybody else on the team. They've completed 11 passes out of 30 attempts. He's picked off 2, broke up 3 more. I think it's probably best not to target him if you're West Virginia, if you can.
Plays the run too. He's always in the backfield. He's got a couple TFLs. I don't understand how like that happens. His numbers don't make sense. And like the weird thing is like I thought they had an edge player named Tyler Onyedem. I thought he'd be a really good player. I think I actually voted him preseason all conference. I don't think he has a sack or a TFL and he's played in every game. Yet they have the TFL and the sack numbers across the board still. And their typical way where they don't blitz because they don't keep people in the back and send them forward. They're gonna have safeties and like I said, they're going to move their linebacker out and they have like the box, he's going to come in and try to gap it. It's going to be hard for them to do it. They still get the pressure. I don't quite understand it too. No one has really had offensive success against them, Chris. They've played close games and have been low scoring, but you haven't seen a team run up a lot of points against them. Again, 10 points a game. And then there's a trend we'll get to here in a second, but how do you pick on them? Because it seems like you're going to have to be able to find grass and sit down and catch it and do that over and over and over, but you also better be able to run the ball and make them move those deep people forward to give your maybe then that up in some possibilities for your passing game there. But that's what everybody tries to do. It still doesn't work all the time.
I was going to say the answers I was going to have are like, yeah, that can be true for everybody. Um, because run the ball. I've already noted the 3 times that it were quote unquote struggling, uh, that they struggled against teams that weren't very good. Those teams ran the ball, averaging over 5 yards per carry. So I think that's some of it. The big thing, the 2 big things, again, kind of just, you always say this stuff, but don't turn it over. I mean, Houston, I am whoever it was that said that Kansas and Oklahoma State were the worst team in the Big 12, Houston is the worst team in the Big 12. Okay,
Hold
put
on.
that out there.
TCU
I
is
know
on there
that
a lot.
they did just beat TCU, so maybe I gotta hedge that a little bit. But Houston could have beat them if they didn't turn the ball over 3 times. They would have struggled mightily. They would have been on FCS upset watch if North Dakota's not turning over, if North Dakota's converting in the red zone. And that's where Iowa State is one of the best, 42% touchdown rate on defense. And they only let teams get there 7 times. I believe that is the third, yeah, there it is. Third fewest red zone attempts in the
Right.
entire country. Ohio
Mhm.
State and Texas, number one, number two. So teams aren't getting there, and when they're getting there, they aren't getting 7 points.
Yeah.
So it sounds so cliche. Hey, run the ball, don't turn it over, and convert in the red zone. There you go. Somebody pay me $4 million and make me a head coach.
Please do it. Yeah. Here we go. Because I'd love to cover that team, actually. I got some things I want to get off my chest. Before we flip the script here, let me give me some numbers here, Chris. 252 to 168, 193 to 120, 221 to 119, 120 to 100, 160 to 132, 65 to 13. In Matt Campbell and John Heacock's years together, this is their 9th season. Those are their second half scoring margins.
Oh, very nice.
They score a lot of points. They do not give up points in the second half. You'd like to talk about script to start the game, Chris. I think you have to have script A and script B and maybe like B1, B2, because when you get to that second half, you better have been taking notes the entire first half of what they've given you, and then you better have answers to start the half, but also answers to their answers. Otherwise, you are gonna get caught in their spiral and they're gonna drag you down. They will gator roll you with their defense because that's what they do. They let you think you got something. They anticipate what your change is based on what you've shown or what you've seen against them in the past. And then they adapt off of that and they do something totally different, or they do something they think is going to be effective and they take away your counter. So, first 30 minutes, really important. And then that first 4 to 6 minutes of the second half, super important to get things figured out before it gets to be too late. Let's go West Virginia offense to defense now. Iowa State defense to offense. We're pretty sure West Virginia has a good offense in their summer. We've seen more of it the past 2 weeks. Iowa State, don't know. Same thing here. They have some star players. They have some pieces that are kind of like stereotypical of a good team. I just don't know this team wants to be good on offense, Chris. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it just seems like it could be easy at times, and yet it's not. It's like they're just in their way. It doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't turn the ball over, commit penalties, that typical stuff that you think is prohibitive for an offense is good. But when I watch them play, it's like, why isn't it easier? Is that an apt observation? And why would that be the case?
If you just showed me some of these advanced stats, some of these PFF marks, some of these, drops and different things like that, I'm going to get to a couple of them here.
Yeah.
I would say, is Iowa State averaging 35 or 40 points per game? And they're not. And maybe I do need to get paid $4 million, and I'll be able to tell you why, because I'm a little confused by it as well. You look around at some of the things they do, and to your point, they don't make mistakes. The turnovers you already mentioned, the penalties you already mentioned. What about drops?
Yeah.
Like you go through their entire receiving core, they have 2 drops on the season according to Pro Football Focus, and one of them was by their number 10 receiver who appeared in one game for like 5 plays, and their other is by their third string running back who was trying to catch a pass out of the backfield on a wheel route.
Mhm.
That's it.
Mhm.
That is all of the drops on the season. So that shows kind of a concentration of just getting the job done that needs to be done. And I think when you can do that, you can find success, or at least enough success that you are capable. Let's not say explosive, but capable. You are playing winning offensive football. And I think that's as best as I can describe it for them.
Yeah. I don't know where to begin here because again, they have like again, the offensive line, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on that, but like they've got a potential star tight end, they have a star receiver, they have star running back power, and their quarterback, if isn't soon, will probably before long be a star, I think. Um, it does seem like they're trying to figure out who is who, but they're incorporating 3 running backs where this looked like it was going to be a one-man show and last season ended. And then they have, they play with 2 receivers pretty much all their snaps. They tried to figure out who the third is. They can't. And Chris, they're playing because of that, because their receiver thing, I think is a little bit different, and because they are maybe so good running the ball. they're in 13 personnel a lot. Like they play three tight ends a bunch, never mind 12 personnel. And that might just be the way it is. Like they're going to be slow and conservative and just be very efficient. But does it very simply begin with Beck? Because it seems like he is capable of getting them out of trouble every so often.
Well, he is, but he also seems to be very um like very specific to what he is capable of doing and
Mhm.
very not capable of doing. And what I mean by that is where he throws the ball and when he throws the ball. Um, between the numbers, Rocco Becht, 53 of 64.
It's crazy.
That's 53 of 64 for 847 yards. That's 13.2 yards per attempt. And whatever completion percentage that is, something crazy, like 80 some percent.
Mhm.
You go outside the numbers, 34 of 58. Not terrible, but for only 326 yards, 5.6 yards per attempt when he starts throwing it outside of the numbers, less than half. So he seems to be surprisingly a lot more comfortable throwing it in the middle with a lot of people there. And actually, I don't know for those that have been watching or listening to this whole thing, towards the beginning of this podcast, my phone went off. And that was because I was texting. I was trying to get a call into a friend of mine who coaches because I wanted to ask the question. He's a defensive coordinator. If you were coaching against a team whose quarterback could not throw outside of the numbers, how would you scheme this up? Is there a certain type of defense? And unfortunately, did not get back to me in time. So maybe I'll have an answer we can add it on after the end of this podcast. But whatever that answer is, I think West Virginia should implement that on Saturday night.
He's completed 26 passes on third down with 18 conversions. That's pretty
True.
good number there.
Yeah.
The ones that he hasn't are third and 10 plus. So if you get third and 9 or less, the chances are he's gonna complete the pass and convert it. He's just really good at that. He gets him out of trouble sometimes. Nine touchdowns, three interceptions, completes two-thirds of his passes, and a kind of a sneaky runner too. Do you remember him from recruiting, Chris? Because I know that the people want to make a big deal of the Markio Beck thing. I can't believe that's a deal. I don't think that West Virginia would do that over at all. Um, what do you remember about him, and what does he become?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember him because Anthony was walking around at the camp
Hard to miss,
and
right? Yeah.
very hard to miss. And that's where you roll the dice so much on recruiting and genes, if you will, and development because now he came and I believe he was still a sophomore in high school. So it wasn't even like his senior year. It was a couple years off. It was the summer before, maybe even the summer before his sophomore year. And he might have been. Now he's currently listed at 6'1", 210 at Iowa State. I'm going to assume that's accurate. When he came to camp at West Virginia, he might have been 5'9" and 150. That's not somebody. That's not a size of a player you're going to recruit to play quarterback at the Group of Four conference
You're
or
not
Power
pushing
Four
anyone.
conference. That's twice I've done that.
Yeah.
Power Four. Um, of course, somebody say, yeah, and turn and look at his father, who's a giant man of a man, standing right over here, and think that's what he can develop into. It doesn't always work out like that. It kind of sort of did. He's somewhere in between. But I do remember he spun it well, but he did not have a strong arm. Maybe these outside the numbers that I threw out just a minute ago, maybe that's a sign of the arms still not quite fully developed yet. Um, but I know again to your point about the hey, oh, this is the Nico versus Rocco thing. Why didn't you offer Rocco? Blah blah blah. Based off what I saw, and obviously the coaches saw a lot more because they worked him out again. They went down and they saw him in person down in Florida, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that day it was like, oh, cool, that's Anthony Beck's son.
Yeah.
He spun it pretty well. It was pretty accurate. And that was the extent of my scouting on that because you kind of just looked and you're like, nah, it's 5'9" and 150, like that way.
Is
And
it bad that I had like the similar thing when I was like, oh, that's Rajah Bell's son?
yeah,
Is he
you
good?
texted me so excited that Rajah Bell was there. And
He wanted a T-shirt. We couldn't get him a T-shirt. I was pretty upset about that. But also, I saw him and I was like, oh, okay. And ever since then, he's become like sliced bread. He committed to Texas, right? Like a
yeah,
legit
and I
four
think he
star.
just claimed a Ohio State offer too. As like maybe back on the market. Who knows? Yeah, 5 stars, 4
Gee,
stars, number 4 quarterback. future 5-star. Shoot.
Go to the running game. This was supposed to be the Abu Samah show. He is tied for the team lead and carries with 48. So someone else has 48. A third running back has 41. I don't think he's been their best running back this year, too. And they've found two guys who I think they had hopes for, but they kind of figured that this is going to be a one-man gang with like guys who are filling in. This is a full-blown three-headed attack right now. And they're different players too, but they're all pretty effective. Their numbers are pretty similar here too. If you're going to run the ball like they want to, and you're going to probably try to make us a third and fourth quarter game, that's a heck of a luxury to have.
Yeah, the carries have been trending more towards Jackson and Hanson, or at least, I mean, against Baylor, it was 15 for Jackson, 15 for Hanson, 8 for Sama. So, and obviously Sama came into the season, like you said, as the guy. Um, we kind of try to look for some trends on some of that stuff to see where they're run. It looks as a team a little bit more to the outside than the inside, a little bit more success, at least for someone like Jackson running to the right than the left. But then some of the other guys have more success running to the left than the right. So which one is it? It's hard to say. It seems to be more of a balanced, like you said, balanced three-headed attack that West Virginia has to prepare for.
Tight ends too. You're almost adding like a sixth or seventh offensive lineman too. Like you can kind of go. They're not. It's not unbalanced because they're going to go tackle guard, center guard, tackle. But when they move those tight ends around, like just get used to shifting and motion and things like that before every snap, and they're going to try to create the advantage and make it work. And then they're going to run behind a tight end, or they're going to have a tight end pull or counter or do like a split zone or something like that. They're effective with it. And like a little guy, a small guy, a fast guy, they just got a little guy, a big guy, and a fast guy. They've kind of got like everything for the moment there too. And hot hand is probably right, whether it's in a game or whether it's across games. But if you're right, they've gotten away from someone and gotten some other players who are pretty good too. Receivers here, Higgins probably one of the better ones in the Big 12. He has a touchdown in 7 straight games. That is the longest active streak in the country. He is kind of like your typical Iowa State receiver when you think about the size and the specs before. And then Jalen Noel is probably like 5'11", 200 pounds, but he's really good at getting inside and finding the spots and going. They have a great little cat and mouse game with those two right there, but also they use their tight end so much too that are not quite blocking threats solely. They can catch it a little bit. Brahmer's probably more the threat there, but it's not quite the guys that you saw in the past that were like 6'8" and just picking it off your helmet up the seams, but they've got something there too. And probably more importantly, they have the makings of that offense that with Purdy and guys like that he was throwing it to was really dangerous here. Just hasn't really clicked through the air. And it's just seemed like a situation where they've had to do something to get going or to answer or to make a play to, put a drive away or put a game away. They've done it. And again, that could be backed, but anybody scare you as far as like matchups or trends in the passing game here?
Uh, Noel and Higgins, and I don't want to say that's it, but you're right. Like it's a lot of tight ends, it's a lot of extra running backs. But Noel and Higgins, they got 9 contested catches this year. That's a solid number for both of them. Five for Noel, 4 for Higgins, excuse me. 1 for the entire rest of the team. So like when you're talking about who's the threat in the passing game, it's those two guys. Uh, that's about it. But
Mhm.
I'm looking here. Romer's got 145 yards for third out of all the
6'7",
receivers.
250 though. That doesn't lie.
It's a big boy.
Yeah.
That's a big boy. So it's not. I don't want to say it's easier when you only have to defend 2 people, but they've schemed it this way. This is the way they want to run their offense. It is those 2 guys and almost those 2 guys solely, as far as receivers go.
When you're bringing up the heat chart for Becht, a lot of it is you only have 2 guys outside. You can't just keep them outside. You got to bring them inside. So they'll put 2 on one side, and one of them's obviously going to go inside. And they're going to try to. You can't just play outside. You're going to have to get them in. So they do drag and they square in a bunch, and then try to make those things happen there. So that could be a part of it. And they played a bunch of people at their third receiver. They just don't use a lot of third receiver personnel. Even if they're down, they'll kind of stick with what they do. They haven't gotten down so much where they've had to abandon their plan. And that's where West Virginia's offense is a great asset to his defense because if you can make Iowa State uncomfortable, especially on the road, they kind of have to get away from what they want to do. I'm not sure they're comfortable having to play from behind and having to be like quick and accelerate the offense and score, and get big plays rather than being methodical and drive. So, man, I'd look for West Virginia to take the ball and try to make something happen right away, too. Again, you don't want to get in the second half against these guys. That's the way they play. Um, West Virginia keys on defense here. They kind of varied their secondary last week a little bit. I don't think it's much of a secret. They played like a lot of like 2 deep safeties, like cover 2, and that's been a defense that's been cover 3 a bunch, where you only have one safety in the deep middle. I think just because what you're talking about, they do the middle so much that it could be difficult to ask your linebacker to deep drop and play the middle. So you might go back to cover three stuff. I would imagine that they'll vary it and try to keep you guessing a little bit because it worked last week. Just the quarterback's much more threatening than maybe either one of the last two they've seen. Just kind of feels like, again, you're going to need your front to help out your back end because that worked really well last week. Never mind the quarterback, but like if you're getting pressure from your front six or five or whatever, you're going to be effective within the back end.
Yeah, that was you kind of right in the middle of there. You mentioned it briefly, and that'd be my biggest concern for West Virginia is that as good as Trotter and Lathan and even Carrico and Cutter have been in certain parts of the game, they have struggled in pass defense. And if they are going to have to be put on some of these guys in pass defense, what are they going to do, especially in zone? Because again, we've already noted that Iowa State doesn't exactly run out 4 and 5 receivers because a lot of their issues are when it's a 4 receivers and they're having to try to keep up with a speedy receiver coming across the middle or in a slot or whatever. This ain't going to be that. There's going to be the 2 receivers. There's going to be the tight end. So if they're going to be in that zone and having to cover that middle with those guys coming across, how are they going to be able to handle that? Or are they going to switch it up, go to the cover three like you noted? What's the plan? I think that's the tweak. That's the coaching kind of put your heads together and come up with a plan that West Virginia needs to do, and I'm sure they are doing ahead of this game.
All right, Chris, we see you wrap it up here. Try to figure some things out as we go out here. Oh my God. Are we going to even do the podcast Saturday night? Should we just do it first thing Sunday morning
Do we want to have this conversation in front of
on
everybody? I
air?
don't know.
Right now.
Who knows?
It might get ugly
Yeah,
because I have thoughts. We'll talk sometime after probably around
yeah.
midnight, I guess. There, one team will win, one team will lose. Probably the winner gets the Fox night game next week too, because they're both slated for 7:30 or excuse me, or Fox or FS1. So a little bit of stakes there. Who or what are we talking about here when this one is over at Mountaineer Field?
All right. I don't want to take. I do want to take a bow here for going off the board and saying Jaheim White last game, saying he had to get going because the offense is better when he is better. It's really deep thought by me there, but nailed that one. Yeah, felt good. This time around. I'm going back to the linebackers. There was a reason why I said I was thinking about that already, and it was Trotter, it was Lathan, because one way or the other, whether it's in the pass defense or it's in the run game, we're going to be talking about them because they are going to have to find a way to slow down this Iowa State offense, even if it's not the best offense in the world. They can run the ball, and when they do pass it, it's over the middle. So those guys are going to be the ones that have to make a difference one way or the other. That steal yours?
Yeah. I think it's a linebacker game, and the reason that not the reason, but a reason that they went to this like true 3-4 days like this when they're going to see 12 and 13 personnel. And if Aubrey Burks is banged up, if he can't throw himself in there to play the run, you don't need 70 snaps out of him. You need more than 7. So somewhere in between is fine. But man, if they can get a number of good quality snaps out of multiple tight ends, they can play 4, and I'm counting French and Bradley here. If you can get those guys to play and to hold up and to stop the run, that makes the game plan easier on defense if they do indeed go that way. I suspect that just to match up in personnel, that's going to be it. And then just so I can't steal your idea, but just watch the second half, man. Like they're really good when they lead at the half. They won 24 straight games when they lead at halftime. Um, like at home, you should be able to get out to a good start. If Iowa State wins the toss and they kick it, you have to ask Matt Campbell some serious questions, like why are you giving this team even a chance to get going? You just want to stay away from those second half adjustments. I know it's cliche or whatever, but I think West Virginia is probably more limited in what they can do defensively. They can open up the bag a little bit offensively, but if they're down a bunch, it makes the adjustments for Iowa State easier. If it's 3 points, 2 points, tied, whatever, no big deal. But like, just you can't be down at halftime there because that's the situation you don't want to be in. Because while they have pulled the rabbit out of their hat, how many rabbits are in there? We'll see. Plenty more coming on the site here. Key matchups, fresh set. Chris, a lot of visitors this weekend too.
Yeah, planning on at least one official visitor. Right now, just one official visitor. Many, many, many more unofficial visitors. You can get the scoop on that from Wednesday's VIP buzz that went up yesterday morning. So check that out. More baseball visitors, I think, too. Got a commitment earlier in the week from a right-handed pitcher that's already topping 90 at high school. Interviews up with him over on the site. Look for some more of those guys coming to town, too.
Branch Rickey here. Look at you. The baseball and the scouting. This is unbelievable. One-stop shop for everything Mountaineers. Earsports.com. We'll catch you after the game on Saturday. Until then, I'm Mike Casaza.
Now I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.